The first morning after we lost our mom, my little sister Lucy stood frozen in front of the cracked mirror nailed to our bedroom wall, clutching a pink hairbrush with trembling fingers as sunlight leaked through the torn curtains and painted dust particles like floating memories in the air. And she whispered, "Emma, I don't know how to braid my hair like Mom did," her voice barely louder than the hum of the ancient refrigerator in the kitchen. And that was the moment I realized grief wasn't loud like the sobbing we heard at the funeral 2 weeks earlier or the endless casseroles neighbors dropped off out of pity. Grief was quiet and sneaky, hiding in everyday moments like tangled hair before school or the empty chair at breakfast. And I swallowed the lump in my throat while staring at our reflection. Me at 15 trying desperately to look older and stronger than I felt. Lucy at 8 with tear-stained cheeks and hair that used to be braided every morning by the woman who could turn chaos into calm with nothing more than her gentle hands and warm humming. And I tried to copy what Mom used to do, splitting Lucy's golden strands into 3 sections, but my fingers fumbled and pulled too tight, making Lucy wince, and I immediately dropped the strands as guilt stabbed through my chest, because since Mom passed away from a sudden brain aneurysm, it felt like every simple task had become a test I was failing. And that day, running late for school, Lucy shoved her hair into a crooked ponytail while we rushed out of our small rental house on Maple Street, cutting through the dusty back road where an abandoned stagecoach stop stood like a forgotten relic of another century. Its wooden beams cracked, its faded sign barely readable, a place most townspeople avoided because it was rumored to be where drifters and homeless people sometimes sheltered. But that morning, as Lucy and I hurried past, we noticed a woman sitting on the weathered bench under the sagging roof, her gray-streaked dark hair braided neatly down her back, her coat patched in several places but carefully cleaned, and she watched us with eyes that carried a strange mixture of sadness and warmth. And Lucy, who had always been braver than me in the simplest ways, slowed down and stared back until I gently tugged her arm and whispered, "Come on, we'll be late." Yet the next morning, everything changed when Lucy refused to leave the house until I tried again to braid her hair, and after another failed attempt, she burst into tears, collapsing onto the porch steps, and I sat beside her, feeling helpless and furious at the universe for taking the one person who knew how to make everything feel safe. And that was when the homeless woman's voice drifted from behind us, soft as falling snow. "I could help with that, if it's all right," and I spun around instantly, protective instincts flaring, because every warning we'd ever heard about strangers echoed in my mind. But Lucy looked up at her like she was staring at an angel disguised in worn-out boots, and the woman slowly approached, keeping her distance, kneeling down so her eyes were level with Lucy's, asking permission with a gentle nod rather than assuming, and after a long pause, Lucy handed her the pink brush, and the woman worked silently, her fingers moving with careful precision, weaving Lucy's hair into the same perfect braid Mom used to make. And when she finished, Lucy's face lit up with a smile I hadn't seen since before the hospital machines and whispered prayers and the doctor's quiet apology. And Lucy hugged the woman without hesitation, whispering, "Thank you," while I stood there stunned, unsure whether to feel grateful or ashamed for judging her so quickly. And when I asked her name, she simply said, "Martha," her voice holding a lifetime of stories she clearly wasn't ready to tell. And from that morning forward, Lucy insisted we leave 10 minutes early every day to stop by the old stagecoach, where Martha would sit waiting, sometimes sipping coffee from a chipped thermos, sometimes reading a weathered paperback, and each morning she braided Lucy's hair differently, sometimes a fishtail braid, sometimes a crown braid, sometimes tiny woven patterns that made Lucy beam with pride all day at school. And slowly, our brief morning exchanges turned into conversations about homework, about Lucy's love for drawing horses, about my struggles balancing school and part-time work at the grocery store since child services had checked in but decided we could stay alone with weekly monitoring from our distant aunt who lived 3 hours away. And Martha never asked for money or favors, never stepped inside our home, never overstepped boundaries, yet she became part of our fragile routine, like sunlight sneaking through cracked shutters. And one freezing November morning, when snow threatened the roads and Lucy's school announced a winter talent showcase, Lucy shyly admitted she wanted to participate but felt too nervous to perform her dance routine without Mom's encouragement, and Martha surprised us by clapping softly and saying, "Your mother would want you to dance anyway," and Lucy's eyes filled with tears as she asked, "How do you know what my mom would want?" And Martha hesitated, looking toward the empty highway stretching beyond the stagecoach, before whispering, because good mothers all want the same thing, for their children to keep living beautifully. And that night Lucy practiced for hours in our living room, spinning barefoot across the faded carpet, and as weeks passed, we learned Martha once worked as a hairstylist decades earlier before losing her job during a factory shutdown, then losing her husband to illness, then her home after medical bills swallowed everything, a chain of tragedies that turned her into someone society barely noticed anymore. Yet she spoke about her past without bitterness, describing it like weather that had simply passed through her life. And the unexpected turn came the morning before Lucy's performance when a harsh winter storm hit our town overnight, covering roads in thick ice and canceling public transport, and I panicked because Lucy's hair accessories and costume ribbons were locked inside my locker at school where I worked afternoons, and Lucy sat at the kitchen table staring at her dance shoes like her dream was slipping away. But Martha arrived at our porch before sunrise, her coat dusted with snow, carrying a small wooden box, and inside were handmade ribbons she had spent the entire night sewing from scraps of fabric, carefully matched to Lucy's costume colors, and she braided Lucy's hair into the most intricate design we had ever seen, weaving the ribbons through each strand like tiny threads of hope, and Lucy gasped at her reflection, whispering, "It's beautiful," while I realized this woman who barely had shelter had sacrificed her entire night to protect a child's dream. And the emotional climax came during the showcase that evening when Lucy stepped onto the stage under bright auditorium lights, trembling at first until she spotted me in the front row and, unexpectedly, Martha standing quietly near the exit, her patched coat contrasting against the polished crowd, and Lucy danced with raw emotion, every spin telling the story of loss, love, and resilience. And halfway through the routine, Lucy pulled a small framed photo of Mom from her costume pocket and held it to her heart, causing the audience to fall silent. And when she finished, the room erupted into a standing ovation, Lucy running off stage, straight into Martha's arms before mine, crying, "I did it because of you." And later that night, as we walked home under glowing streetlights, I noticed Martha shivering harder than usual and insisted she come inside just for hot soup, breaking the invisible boundary she had always respected. And she hesitated before finally agreeing, stepping cautiously into our home like she was entering sacred ground. And while she warmed her hands around a mug of tea, she revealed a profound truth that changed everything. Years ago, she had lost her own daughter in a car accident, a daughter who loved dance and braids and pink ribbons, and seeing Lucy crying on our porch weeks earlier had felt like time rewinding, giving her a chance to pour love into someone who still needed it. And I realized then that kindness is often born from pain people carry silently. And days later, Child Services visited again, this time concerned about rumors that Lucy and I were interacting with a homeless woman daily, and I feared they would forbid it. But when Lucy proudly showed photos of her performance and described Martha as the reason I can still feel Mom in the mornings, even the caseworker wiped tears from her eyes. And unexpectedly, she connected Martha with a local shelter program that offered transitional housing and part-time work opportunities. And months passed as spring replaced snow, and Martha slowly regained stability, eventually securing a small apartment and returning to hairstyling at a community salon that offered discounted services to struggling families. Yet every morning, without fail, she still met Lucy at the old stagecoach stop to braid her hair, not because Lucy needed it anymore. By then Lucy had learned to braid her own hair fairly well, but because traditions can become bridges between broken hearts. And on the first anniversary of Mom's passing, Lucy and I visited the cemetery carrying wildflowers and the pink brush that started everything. And as we stood there silently, Martha joined us, placing a handmade ribbon beside Mom's headstone, whispering a quiet thank you to the woman she never met yet felt connected to through us. And as the wind rustled through tall grass and sunlight warmed our faces, I felt something shift inside me, a realization that while loss never disappears, love has an extraordinary way of reappearing through unexpected hands, through strangers sitting on abandoned benches, through simple acts like braiding a child's hair before school. And as we walked away from the cemetery, Lucy slipped her hand into mine and Martha walked beside us, no longer just a homeless woman at an old stagecoach stop but family forged by shared grief and chosen compassion. And I finally understood that sometimes the people society overlooks are carrying the exact kindness the world desperately needs. And though we lost our mom, the universe, in its mysterious and imperfect mercy, sent someone who reminded us that love doesn't end when a life does. It quietly finds new ways to braid itself into our mornings, our memories, and our futures, one gentle strand at a time.